Boyo alert. Whoa, oh, oh, There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy. They say he wandered very far, very far, over the land and sea. And then one day, one magic day, he passed my way. And while we spoke of many things, fools and kings, this he said to me: the greatest joy you'll ever learn is just to love and be loved in return. Now, I learned that song first when I was going through a transformative period of my life, when I was trying to go from a raw, unshaped boyo into a better, more profound, more put together boyo. I was trying to improve myself, and I was specifically targeting my voice. I was trying to become a better musician, trying to become a better creator, trying to become a better storyteller, and most importantly, most specifically, trying to become a better singer. And so this aim, when I was younger, drove me towards a great deal of inner transformation. And this is generally what I'm going to talk about, is how the dynamic relationship between your quest, your purpose, your hero's journey outwards, and the inner quest, the inner conquest you have to achieve, the things you have to overcome in order to reach that end goal. And I guess just document what that was, and I guess show as opposed to tell, because I do a lot of telling and I'd like to start showing somewhat. So the most important thing to understand here is, like, I guess you should say, talk about success, because I notice a lot of people in this, in any sphere, if you listen to, like, you know, those self-help guys and all that, a lot of what they're saying is that success is a mindset thing, and that can become quite an esoteric, annoying thing. People are like, it's all in your mind, man. You're like, shut the fuck up, I want results, man. Where are the results going? And so when I started trying to improve my voice, I was very technical. I was very like, all right, what I want to do is I want to get like a training regime, and I want to do all that stuff and get that done. And you know, look at it almost like the gym. And that's the correct attitude. You need these sort of basics in place. But the voice especially is something that you're going to have to face yourself eventually, because, well, look, I'm going to use the example from a great singer called Jeff Buckley, who describes the voice as the essence, as your soul. The voice, and especially as an artist, your voice, and your voice can appear in any ways. It can appear in the way you paint. It can appear like in your storytelling, in the way you talk, your attitude. But specifically when you're trying to sing, like, your voice is really coming across in its raw sense. You're really just being that sound. Like the voice is you. There's so little disconnect between it. It never changes. You can't make your voice something else. It is what it is, and you have to learn to use that. You know what I mean? That is what you have, and so in order to develop a good voice, a quality voice, a voice that you would show to the world, you have to, I guess, confront yourself. And this stuff is all so esoteric and funky and weird and all that a lot of people get caught up in it. They're like, what do you mean confront yourself? Like, dare I say, is that jargon? And so I want to show you what that was like for me. Because when I started out, I didn't like my voice. I was like, oh, this is a shit voice. I can't sing. And to be honest, I couldn't really. It was probably closer to shouting. And the main reason was I was trying to reach outside my range. I wanted my voice to be high, like Jeff Buckley, like those people I'd listen to that have these super high voices, this big range and all that stuff. And And I was driving in. I was like, I want to have that. I want to do that. I want to be like them. Pay attention, because that was the first little nugget that I started to notice. I guess it stems, and like all of this stuff tends to stem from deep, ancient beliefs. And ancient, I mean like childhood or beliefs from your youth and whatnot. I always wanted to be great at something, you know. I always wanted to achieve something, like that ambition. And I think that's a very healthy thing. Like, people sort of shame that. And I'm going to show you how there's wisdom to telling people, don't get too caught up in achieving validation from your ambition, because that can be a dangerous path, and it can, and it's true, and I'll show you why. But at the same time, like, again, I'm all about tension. Like, I talk about the shadow and all that. One great thing I like about Jung is he explains how what generally happens with evolution is, with evolution is competition. A very common archetype is the warring brothers, and that would be like two concepts having a fight, and the tension between them is where all the growth happens. Christ, Satan, and in this situation you could say ambition versus, I guess you could say, self acceptance, like the desire to be validated and glorified because you're great, and also the ability to accept that you don't need to do that in order to be validated, to be happy, to be I guess you could even say to be great. Like, you can achieve it in a more basic way, in a more inner way. And I don't believe that there's necessarily a truth to either of those two positions. It's almost like, you know, it's a spectrum. Like, you do need to hang in the middle. And I was going on with this one. I was like, oh, go do it, man. Go do it. And what's interesting is that seated in my head that as I am, I'm not good enough. Like, this is a shit bit of raw material. So what I need to do is I need to change into something else. And when I was younger, I was never cultivated. I was never no one came to me. I was like a farmer boy. So no one came to me and said, hey, I'm going to take you into, the Academy of Athens, and I'm going to craft you into a Uberboyo, in a Superboyo, a Solar Boyo. Oh, you look like you have a Solar Boyo within you. You look like you have a God within you. You look like you have greatness within you. Potential, I'm going to craft that out. And as I've described before, that drove me mad. I was like, I really, really want to do the best thing. Why are people punishing me? Why are people not rewarding me for wanting to be better? Why are people sort of ignoring that or favoring, other stuff, or even punishing me for it in some sense? I'd be like, I want to be better. And like, oh, you need to sacrifice your dreams and accept less. And I'm like, what? Why would you say that? That's insane. Am I going crazy? Where do I live? What's happening? And so in one sense, yes, I wanted to change. But underneath that was this sort of idea that it's like, as I am, I'm not good enough. And that's problematic when you've got a voice. So I would look to all these other people who had, childhood prodigies. I'd read up about stories, like you'd read up about Jeff Buckley or something like that, and they'd be like, oh, he started singing when he was 2 years old. Like, he was born hitting high notes, and you're like, oh, I started when I was 14, 15. That's when I started picking up music and all that. And you're thinking to yourself, it's like, I'm so far behind. I've got so much work to do. I have to catch up. I have to outwork my lack of time, And then you'd hear stuff like, you need to do 10,000 hours of dedicated, hard, proper work in order to achieve anything. So you're like, oh man, I've been fucking about. No one told me that I should work on this. Instead, I was just sitting around being a bumpkin, doing nothing. And now I'm waking up and I'm like, oh my God, I have to get things moving. And so that core idea that I'm going to set up this whole story on was probably the thing that set all this snowball, which turned out to be very, very negative. We're gonna tell a nasty story here. And it was that two things kind of grew out of that. The first was, I need to rush and I need to get better. And from one of them, I got impatience, and I got a lot of it. And it was very, very bad. All right. So they talk about the virtue of patience. I had to learn the hard way. So I guess the reason why I'm telling you is please don't learn this shit the hard way. It's so much worse learning this shit the hard way, man. And then the other one was envy. You would see people like Jeff Buckley. You would see great singers, and they just do it so effortlessly. And they're like, oh yeah, they were born to do it. You're not born to do it. you're not good enough. And it's not a thing of you can get better. You're literally like just not. It's just your soul is wrong. And then you'd feel angry at them, and then you'd want to be like them. You'd feel frustrated. You'd dislike yourself. You wouldn't accept yourself, and you'd look at them and be like, I want to be like them. Yeah, bro. And so my big deal was going for that, training for that and whatnot. And I went all in on that. I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And it started to spiral into a problem because, as I said, I was trying to reach outside my voice. I was like practicing singing too high, singing too much, working too hard, and the energy inside of it all was this panicky need, this almost like frustration that I was putting into it. It was like angsty in some sense, and I was working a lot. Like I would never say that my virtue was lack of hard work. I of course worked a lot, but hard work is not a virtue on its own. Hustle is not a virtue on its own. It can actually be a danger, and it was for me. Where it was coming from was just an awful place. So I'm there trying to change my voice, be something else. I'm there like, playing guitar a lot and whatnot, and what started to happen is it's almost like this frustration, all these energies that I'm talking about, you can call them gods if you will, all these forces started to get stored in my body. So I started to get like a little bit tense. Like I'd play guitar and sing for hours, and I'd feel these muscles get a little bit heavy. The band was on top of this. They get a little bit tight, and then I'd put it down and sleep, and it'd go because you're young, you're fine. And then I'd wake up the next day and I'd go for it again. And I'd be charging doing this stuff, and eventually I would start to feel this stuff get worse and worse and worse. It was like, but I'd ignore it. I'd put it behind me. I'd be like, no, that's not a big deal. Keep fighting, man. Keep fighting. And now my soul was invested in this, like all in that type of situation. I was like, all right, all into this, give up on everything. And at some point I was out of college, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go all in for this, the ambition thing. And I started to run out of money. So I started going like a little bit broke. I was like, okay, sweet, I'm all in this. This is what it is, the starving, ambitious artist. That's what it is. So I was broke, and I was thinking, I've got to invest all in this. And I was forcing it. I was like, this is how it has to be. I want it to work this way. Now I want you to pay attention to the way I was thinking. I was like, it has to be this way. I'm not going to ignore, I'm going to literally ignore reality. And I'm going to force it down this way, and it has to work this way. And then there's all this inner stuff, like I need it to work. I was angry, I was impatient and all that. And so from giving up on like I should have got a fucking job or something like that, at least part-time to kind of sort me out. But instead I was doing all this, and scarcity would begin to settle in, because obviously, despite the fact that I was all in, I wasn't getting any, I wasn't sustaining myself, all that. So I was always worried about the future. What happens if I fail? Not only do I believe that, by nature, I'm not good enough, but I'm also now starting to worry that, on top of not being good enough, I'm taking a risk. What if I fail? What if I practice all this and nothing happens, and I go broke? What will happen? Will hyenas just show up at the door and eat me? Be like, you idiot, you got it all wrong. You got it all wrong. And so one day I was working really hard, and then suddenly it's called carpal tunnel, all these, the nerve around here just pinched. And then suddenly it all seized up around here. Like my kind of shoulder, my chest, back in the back of my neck. I can still feel a little bit now even, tense. And it was all ooh, rigor mortis style stuff. And I had an injury. So not only was I pushing from all this, I was desperate. I was frustrated. I wanted to change. I'm not good enough. I need to change. I need to get better. I need to escape this thing that I am, this ugly amorphous creature, and I need to blossom into the butterfly of the new me and all that. And suddenly I'm now carrying a wound. And what's crazy about this is that it was entirely premised on the mindset that I was putting into it. I was angry at not being good enough, and every time I practice, I remember this, I'd sort of have this sadness in me. It was like, oh, this is shit. And it was frustrated, I had that all these feelings around it, and it was getting stored in my body. Like now when I'm playing around, I really enjoy it. It's fun, it's loose, I'm not trying to be something I'm not, and it turned out way better as well. But back then, like, a lot of it did turn out shit, and I'm sure it would have been good if I had just settled into what I was, maybe lowered my range or something like that. But back then it was horrible. Like every time I would work, every time I'd practice, it was a nasty experience. I'd use the same metaphor when you go to the gym. Like you go to the gym and you're like, you're going for too much weight, and you're saying to yourself like it has to be weightlifting or something like that, and you just riddle yourself with injuries because maybe you would have been better off doing something like Ido Portal, getting into movement, accepting that like you don't need to lift all the weight. Like is there any real validation to that? Like that's sort of something you do for other people in some sense. Like maybe you just got to get in decent shape and maybe turn it into something that suits you more. Maybe your body is more suited to something else. Maybe it's better suited to, become a good wrestler. Because at the end of the day, like, no one really cares. Like, they care about what you achieve. That can be very impressive. And what you achieve is entirely dependent on you achieving it. It's not dependent on like, oh, look, you can sing really high. People don't just walk around and be like, well, there you go, validated, well done. But then like you've produced no music, or your musicality shit and all this, or it doesn't really sound like you. It's, like you have to sort of take it away from that goal in some sense and think more about what you are. And I wasn't doing that, so I got an injury. Now, the reason why I'm telling you this as well, there's so much in this story, is because the nature of pain is fascinating. Like they've got this thing called pain science, which I've talked about a little bit on the channel. Like this is legitimately something I want the fucking boyos to look up. Pain science is this amazing discovery, I guess you could say this amazing body of knowledge, this amazing science, where they're looking at the fact that pain does not seem to be attached to the thing you think it's attached to. We imagine that if I punch my arm or my chest, if someone like sticks a knife through my hand, Jesus Christ, why am I saying that? If someone, wounds me and it causes damage, it's like, oh, there's a cut there. My brain will be like, damage, therefore pain. But we're starting to find out that it's not like that. The best example is, you ever hear of phantom limb syndrome? So you lose your hand, you cut your arm off. So gruesome, man. And like you lose your hand or something like that, and years later you're sitting in the car, and then so you lose it in a car crash, and you're sitting in the car and you're driving, and then at that moment when you come to the same crossroad where you had that crash, suddenly you'll start feeling all this pain in your hand. Because for some reason your mind triggers it, even though you don't have a hand. So you're walking around like this, looking like Jimmy after a FAP session. And oh my God. I literally can't go an entire podcast without bringing up something like that. So you're looking like this, and you start to feel pain in these fingers that you haven't had for years. And it's because your brain is interpreting the reality you're in and deciding what should hurt according to that. It's absolutely fascinating. Your brain causes pain based on the story it experiences. So it gets, you hurt someone's hand, and what happens is the sensation goes up into the mind, and it says, hand has been hurt. And then what your mind does is your mind looks around, looks at the situation. It's like, am I in like a nice peaceful Caribbean room, or a beach or something like that, where there's nothing to worry about? Or am I in the middle of a war? Or what's going on here? Or am I like, or am I really sad? Did I have a really, really bad day? Do I believe that getting wounded is the end of my life? Now, there's a very important one. Do I believe if I get hurt that it's like life is over? Do I believe that I'm very, very weak, and if I get hurt, I'll be hurt forever and there's nothing I can do about it? Or do I believe that like, oh, it's just a flesh wound, I'll get over it? Like that all plays into it. And then your brain makes a decision, and then your brain will look down and see, and if there's blood, for example, people are way more likely to get triggered by it. So if it looks down, it's just like a scratch or like a red mark, and it just kind of hurts. You're like, oh, you'll shake it off and you'll forget about it, and your brain will be like, that's not a big deal. You look down, you see a bit of blood. Even like a kid would look down and see a bit of blood, and he'd be like, oh, cool, blood. And he looks at his mum, and his mum runs over and goes, oh my God, what happened? Oh my God, this is so serious. And his brain hears mother, the goddess, the one who was like knows shit, who's been taking care of me. She's telling me this is serious. And then suddenly he'll start crying. Even though before he didn't give a fuck. He was like, oh wow, look, red stuff. ketchup. Now he's thinking, oh my God, I'm going to die, I'm going to die, I'm going to die. And it starts hurting more, you know? So the idea is that these wounds, our body is influenced by their stories more than anything. Jung said we live in a dream. He won that wrong. That young guy, he knew a few things. Like he was woke. He was clicked with. And so I was having all these gods, these forces, frustration, envy, desire to be better, shame at what I was. Shame. I'm not good enough. Shame. I think that single idea penetrates all of us so deeply on such a soulful level. People really struggle with the idea of I'm not good enough, no matter what field you are. So I hope you understand what I'm trying to put out here is this idea that like I've went through it. I'm pretty sure I've spoke to a lot of people. Everybody goes through it. It's really hard to deal with that emotion because the tragedy of human life is that in some sense you aren't good enough. Because there's so much to do. You can't be good enough at everything. And in some sense, you need to niche down. And there's the spoiler alert. You need to look at what you are and say, I'm going to niche down and become good enough at that. As opposed to me, where I'm like, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to become good enough at something that is not naturally my competence, such as like fucking falsetto singing or something like that. And so I had all these forces going on, and then suddenly I get this wound, and my brain starts to attach the story to the pain, and it all gets packed into it. And then the experience of practicing, of singing, of even playing guitar is now painful. It's now painful. Look at how these concepts, these beliefs, they were so abstract, like you wouldn't think they matter at all. Now they're in my body. Now they're literally affecting my destiny. What does Jung say when he says, what is unconscious will drive your life and you will call it fate. And until you make it conscious, it will control you like this. This will shape your destiny. Now I understand. I wish I didn't have to learn this way. But no, you can learn. Now I understand though. It's that, all right, oh fuck. Because I didn't sort out that belief, it possessed me like a demon, you know? So, I start storing this pain. And then I sort of start losing hope a bit, but my attitude remains the same. My inner game, and I didn't do any work in here, so my attitude remains the same. What I'll do is I'll push through. I'll keep working like an animal, and I see that as a virtue. Not understanding it needs context to be a virtue. I'll keep working, I'll keep fighting, I'll keep going for it. I'll keep piling on the pressure, the frustration. I'll keep investing in this path that's not working, and that will make it better. So of course it just gets worse and worse and worse, and then suddenly, like just through sheer restriction, I have to stop singing so high. I have to stop trying to sing so high. Thank God, because I'm sure it sounded awful to anyone who heard me. But now I'm getting bullied because it hurts. Now, because I'm resisting what I am, I'm resisting my voice, my soul. It's starting to pull me out of my bullshit. It's dragging me to the floor, almost like it's like you need to face yourself. And I guess underneath it, that shame idea, that I'm not good enough idea, the one thing I didn't want to do, the hardest thing to do was to turn around and say, yeah, bro, you're not good enough. Like, you know, that was almost criminal for me to admit that, because that meant I wasn't allowed to believe I can't transform anymore. That's what that meant. That meant I had to give up in some sense. And I was like, I will never give up. So can you see the tension, the difficulty with all these ideas? It's like, I will never give up. And I cannot let anything get into my head that will tell me that I cannot give up, that I cannot do it, that I cannot transform. That would always wreck my head when people would come to me and say, you know, oh, like when people say the word I can't. I remember with my dad specifically, and big kudos to Daddy Boyo out there when he was saying to me, what's his face? He said, there's no such thing as you can't. He would say that. I was like, yeah, fucking go on, you can do anything. And it's great, as I said, it's tension. It's a great attitude to have, but also you need to look at the warring brother, what it's fighting against. And so I was like, all right, ambition, keep fighting, keep working, keep hard work, push through and all that stuff. But at the same time, I needed to sort of sacrifice that belief, that ambition. I needed to give up on the idea that I could do anything, and instead look at what I am and say, well, you know what, I'll just accept this and I'll do something with this. And hopefully that'll be enough. And the profound wisdom in that is that I think that's more true. It's that, all right, it's like first you have to give up on the idea that you can do anything and accept what you are, and then do something with that. And then you'll find that you can do a fucking lot with that. Like you can do pretty much anything with yourself as long as you accept yourself. And that's where the sort of faith in your humanity comes. You realize that you are an absolute treasure. You are like incredible at adapting. Humans are just so smart. They're so good at making stuff happen. But it has to be premised on a sort of spiritual realization where it's like, right, well, I'm gonna be myself, And as I'm saying, it's like that's cliche jargon, but I'm trying to paint to you what this means and how I had to learn it and why this way. It was so bullheaded and dumb, but I guess this is how I recast this alchemically into something worth gold to others. Maybe I'll motivate all you boyos to become Jeff Buckley's, perhaps. Let's hope. And so lost me train of thought a bit there. Wait there. Yeah, so I had this injury. This is bad now, so things are spiraling downwards. And I was with a girl at the time, which, bless her, such an anima. She kind of turns around to me and she says, "All right, listen, lad, I love you. You're very funny. You're very charismatic. You're very, very handsome. I have this premonition that at some point in the future, you might even be like this boyo of some sort, like I feel stuff, just that female intuition." But she was like, you gotta get a bit practice. You gotta get a bit practical, bro. You can't just, run around and be a nonce. Like you can't just be doing this. Like you can't be feeling sorry for yourself. You can't be broke. Like you have to go and do something. So she was like, "Oh, why don't you go try teach English or do something like that?" And so I went and started doing that. And then she'd be like, "Go out there and try stuff. Go for stuff and whatnot." And so I was like, "Yeah, fuck, all right, I'll do it." And I did a few gigs and stuff like that. And again, I could have done a lot better if I was accepting myself, but they were good experiences, facing fears and all that stuff. And yeah, I was with her for a while. Now, she's an important part of this because I guess in some sense you attach the spiritual stuff you're going for, the psychological stuff you're going for, like that frustration, that hope, those ambitions and all that, they start to intertwine with the people you meet and whatnot. And so with her, I would sort of start to see her as the person I could confide in and be like, I'm going through all these struggles and all this stuff, and but like I really believe I'm gonna make it. I really have all this ambition. Of course, like girls love that stuff. They're like, oh, it's a great energy to feel someone who's gonna go for it. But it's also really, really annoying as well because they're always like working, and especially if you're working wrong, it can become super annoying. It's like, what the fuck is this dude up to? And yeah, so we were building that relationship, and she, like, a few things we developed was she was sort of like, all right, dude, you gotta be a little bit more efficient. We only get to see each other for like a half an hour each night. Like, what the hell? Like, why can't you kind of clear up some time? Stop kind of wasting it in this like nonsense spiral. And looking back, of course, like a lot of the stuff I was doing was pointless and ineffective. And so she sort of, her demands, she was like, I want to see you more. Her demands are pretty legit. It's like, if I sort of paid attention to them and said, okay, right, wait a second, this isn't just demanding female. This is her legitimately saying, like, I want to see you more. And the consequence of that is that I'm sort of probably wasting the vast majority of my time. Like 10 hours of work is not a virtue. In fact, for me at this point, because I was so not sorted out in my head, it was driving me into the floor. It was a negative thing, a vastly negative thing. And so, yeah, she would say stuff like that to me, and of course I wasn't mature enough. I hadn't climbed into my depths and pulled it out and made myself understand what I need to do. So I would get a little bit anxious. I'd be like, oh fuck! Like when it start getting late, I'd feel bad about my day because I've achieved nothing. All I've done is like triggered my pain or something like that, and yeah, that would annoy her. That would annoy me. I'd be like, oh fuck, what's going on here? So at this point, before I met her, I made one of probably the worst decisions of my life. That probably would have solved a lot of this stuff. And this is going to show you another key mindset that everybody knows about, but no one does. Scarcity. So because I had no money, and I was like, I've got to make sacrifices for this glorious ambition that I'm going for. I said, I'm going to stop going to the gym. Now, at that point, like, I was juicy. I was like, I remember squatting. You could get like 2 girls, one on each shoulder, and I was able to squat them. And I was flying, like, and I should have desperately kept that up. But I was like, all right, I got to make some, executive choices here. I got to go all in on this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sacrifice probably the single best habit for any male you can have in the modern world, which is hitting the gym, like showing up there. And so I gave that up. I was like, all right, sweet. I was like, oh no, I'm going to have to do this. I don't have enough money for like €30 a month, like utter bullshit, such small-minded thinking. This, like, and you can look for these mindsets, and it's almost like you could predict that I was going to fail because of these things. You could see it from the start, and if only I could have went in, like, dived into the unconscious, pulled these out. Like gods, like little parasitic gods, and struck them down with the higher gods, the virtuous gods, such as the Apollo of light and reason, and look down at them, and then take Christ, the noble understanding of suffering and the self-acceptance, and then like Aries, the correct understanding of how to project energy into the world. And I could have grabbed all these, and Zeus, and ordered them all, and I could have just killed off this scarcity, this frustration, this envy, this lack of. I could have just smashed them all down with these higher virtues, but I didn't do that because I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. And so what does it mean that scarcity took over? As I'm trying to describe, and this is a concept that I'm still wrestling with, it's very raw. You're getting this off the tip of the tongue, just as it's organizing itself into the images in my head and just spilling out of my tongue. You're getting it raw here. You're on the cutting edge of the boyo's mind right now. It was like I was possessed. That's really what I'm trying to get down to. And scarcity was one of them. And the more I look back across this period of my life, because this was a very formative period and a very powerful period for teaching me core lessons. And it really made me who I am. Like, this was, I guess, a great hero's journey in and of itself. Like, obviously I have a much bigger life apart from this, but this was a little nugget that I got a lot out of. It was like me diving down. It was genuinely me getting crushed by these deep beliefs, this is them manifesting in the world because I did not go within. So this is a mistake, if you get what I'm saying. And it's difficult to try to figure out exactly what were the core drivers, because impatience was one and scarcity was another. Now, I've always wondered, I've thought to myself, it's is it those two, or is there something deeper? Like, have you got scarcity, fear of not having enough, and impatience, fear of having to rush, and then envy? Obviously envy is derivative of that impatience, or maybe they've got a common root or something like that. And the question is, like, is there a common root between shame, doubting yourself, not thinking you're good enough, and impatience and all that? And I actually do think the common root I kept on coming back to was this question of, am I good enough? Do I believe in myself? Can I do it? But as I articulated before, it's very difficult for me to understand the correct way to wrestle with that issue, because are you supposed to turn around and say, yes, I am good enough? Because you can say that, but you don't believe it. Like, how do you solve it? And is it supposed to be a situation where I am good enough and therefore ambition? Because that clearly, as we can see, that was an issue for me. I did believe I could do it on one level, but another part of me believed I couldn't do it. You know what I mean? And that's the part that held me up. That was the part that was like latched onto me like a monster. And so is it this total self-acceptance thing? But what happens when that grabs you and you fall down into, the world of, I accept myself and I'm never going to try to do anything ever? And then you get a lot of people who are, shall we say, wiser than you, and they know that you shouldn't try anything. And it's almost like, as Nietzsche pointed out, it's like a well-rationalized nihilism in some sense, a spiritual nihilism, that hidden behind something far more glorious. And it's hard to know, it's hard to know. Like, I guess one thing I'm trying to say is that like my whole life I've always hated I canters. People have been like, you can't do that. Like you could say more cynical and realists and whatnot. But as I've grown up and confronted with them, like I'd always be like asserting stuff and people would be like, no, no, no. And I would hate that. I would hate that bullshit. But I used to just frame them as wrong, or I'll prove them wrong. And then all my energy was a little bit angry, a little bit chip on the shoulder, like, and chip on the shoulder, like there's something that immediately kind of flashes to my mind. My problem was in my shoulder. I wonder how much chip on the shoulder and all that was playing into it. You get what I'm saying? And then as I matured, I would learn to like accept that their realism is true. Maybe you should accept that you can't do everything, and then, as I said, digest it and do something. So it's hard to know. But nonetheless, these forces were driving me, as I've already articulated over and over again, repeating myself somewhat. But this is when things started to get bad, because and this is when probably its most enlightening. This stuff had snowballed now at this point. And I was at the point where I was going to the gym and I was thinking to myself, again, same patterns, okay? So I'm doing a new behavior, same patterns. I'm going to the gym and I'm listening to like Elliot Hulse and he's being like, yo, fucking get juicy. Like, I go to the gym and I just load up the weights. It's like, yep, I'm going to go heavy. I want to get big and strong. And I'm well able for it, because like the old gym stuff was there as well. And I want to fix that shoulder. But after a while, I started to lose sight of I'm in here to make the shoulder better. And I started to kind of move towards, I'd love to look like that. The envy thing comes back. It's like, I'm not good enough as I am. I'm not going to work with what I am. I'd love to look like that. And it became that type of thing. So then I was like, all right, more. And that's all right. Usually you can handle it if you're being relatively focused and you're not like a stupid idiot. But one day I went in and I got a text from the girl and she was like, all right, look, bro, like it's late already. Where the fuck are you? So suddenly we have this little story, this little chaos in life that I hadn't sorted out properly. And now it's starting to put pressure on me, this time pressure. And coming from that inefficient work, And then I'm in there and I see someone that I used to know from back in the day. And I don't really know them anymore, but I see them. And I'm kind of thinking to myself, like, oh, fuck. Oh, I better, I better look like I'm doing something here. I better not look like I'm fucking dicking around. I better look like I'm actually, putting in some real work here. So I load up the deadlift bar, proper heavy, and I do reps. I do reps of deadlifts. Like, even now, I'm just like, you're such an idiot, dude. Because, I didn't want to look like I was doing nothing. And I bang out, 10 reps in a couple of sets of, deadlifts. Not, paying no attention to form. I was just gripping and ripping. God knows what was going on in my back at that point. And I'm fine, And I don't really talk to your man, but I meet him later after this. But anyway, you can see how these outside pressures are now affecting my inner peace. Now I'm getting influence from the outside. It's not coming from within. It's coming from outside. And so, I do that. And I go and I meet the girl. We're on our way home. We're going to grab some dinner. I'm on time, or maybe I was a little bit late. I don't know. But on the walk home, suddenly my leg goes numb. The left side. So the shoulders up here on the left side, not the legs on the left side. And I'm like, whoa, what is that? It's really freaky for a second. It feels like a pulled muscle, but not like anything I've ever felt before. It feels like numb, like the back of my knee's gone numb and my leg's not really working properly. And I'm telling her, yeah, this is really weird. I don't know what's going on. I end up going to sleep, sort of a little bit confused. I wake up the next day. I reach over, I pick up the phone. She goes to work. I pick up the phone and I'm like, numb leg into Google. It's like, cancer. Numb leg into Google. And obviously the worst thing you can ever do is ask Google. Numb leg into Google. And Google says, oh yeah, you've broke your back. And I'm like, no, what? And so this is now a new story getting put in on top of me. Oh, you've broke your back. You've burst your spine. You've damaged your spine. So I'm there imagining, the Chinese, it's something I used to say to my friends, is you are as old as your spine. And then I'm reading this thing that's being like, oh yeah, that spine of yours has got a hole in it now. It's broken. It's snapped. And even the way it says it's snapped, broken, burst discs and all that. And that got into my head and I freaked out. As I said before, the story determines the pain. So when I thought it was just like a pulled muscle the day before, I didn't really hurt. It was just like this weird rubbery numb feeling. Suddenly now I'm lying in bed and I'm like, oh my God, it feels like my back's broken, because that's what I think it should feel like. Now I'm freaking out. And I wrestle with this story. And it's very interesting to watch what my mind was doing. I remember it clearly. The story would come in. It's like, you've burst your spine. And I'd be like, go away. No, I don't know yet. It could be anything. Resist it. No. Resist the story. It could be anything. Do not let the story in your head. And this was unconscious. Like, I didn't know this was the right thing to do or anything like that. So I say, all right, I'll go to get an expert. Now, luckily, I've been doing this English teaching, so I had a bit of cash at this point. Now, I wasn't rolling in it, so going to like a Dublin physical therapist and slopping out €75 was like, oh, Jesus. You know, again, not getting this stuff in order starts to cost you cash. You may think, oh, well, what's the point in doing this deep diving trauma, shadow work, and massage out the bullshit? What's the point? It's not going to achieve anything. Yeah, well, it starts costing you cash when you reach this point, and then you know. And so go to the physical therapist, and the physical therapist gets me to do a couple of exercises. I think, yep, you've got a burst spine. So now the authority turns to me and says, yes, your spine is broken, sir. And this story sets in. And this was a really hard point for me, because the word broke was pretty much as hard as you can. It's hard to take that. It's hard to hear that you have broken. Because if I was struggling with that idea that I'm not good enough to reach for the highest, and now I had this pain riddling my body that was telling me, you can't even start, you know? Like, that's what I guess what felt the worst about it is that I didn't even feel like I had reached competency in many of these things. Like when I was in the gym, it's not like I had hit the standards and I was about to work on an elite level. Like I had only been beginning back for a month and all this, or a couple of months, and already I'm back on zero. Like I couldn't get off that ground. I couldn't start. And then it's the same with the singing. It was like, oh, why aren't I improving as much as I want to? I've been putting so much work into this and I'm not improving. I'm barely getting off the ground. Well, of course, it's because I wasn't doing the right thing. You're not entitled to improve because you put into work. Again, hard work is not a virtue. You're not entitled to improve just because you want it. You have to actually do it correctly. And so, that really crushed me. That was sad. That was disheartening. That was discouraging. That bottomed me out. But I did not confront the core beliefs, and so the problem persisted. I kept on working despite this pain. And Jesus, like, where am I at now? You know, like I've got a fucked up leg, which I believe is a broken back, and it's connected to this arm, because they suddenly all start to feel it. So when it hurts my leg, it triggers the arm as well, because the nervous system is all one. And then I convince myself more and more that like it's all connected, and my entire left side is just like done, out for the count. So every day I'd walk around, and it's just this little, I wouldn't even say little, it was quite a loud pain all the time, everywhere. And I'm just walking around, this is my reality. I couldn't sit down, you know. And how do you explain that to someone? How do you say it to your girl? Like, I tried not to talk about it too much, but, you know, like, what are you going to say? It's like, oh, I'm in pain all the time. She's sort of like, oh, I love you. But deep down, you're sort of like, this is so pathetic. And she knows it too. And yeah, so I tried to just get on with it. I tried to make do with it and do the best I could. And yeah, all right, it was working, but it just wasn't getting better. And I wasn't dealing with it properly. And I just kept on doing what I was doing before. I was like, I'll work my way through this and be successful, and then I'll deal with it. And, you know, that meant that I wasn't making clear plans. Now suddenly my mind was clouded by pain all the time. And I was obsessing about these preconditions about success that I wanted. I want success to be this way, and I was going to force my hand through. I'm going to push the door down type situation. And I was making it was like, this is how it has to happen. Yeah, this is how it has to happen. And so no longer was I even thinking clearly in that sense. And this made me very intimate with pain. I really began to understand what pain was then. I began to feel it every day, and it was chronic and it was long term, and it got built into my head, and it had a story with it and all this. And it was arduous, and just because I suffered a lot, and like this is something I think it's so important to understand. I suffered a lot. Like I suffered an immense amount. Didn't make any difference. There's no glory in it. There was no reward at the end. I just suffered a lot. That's all that happened. And you'd imagine, all right, he suffered a lot. God's gonna be nice. God's gonna let him out. Nope. Then my house was taken from me. I was like Job in some sense. My house was taken from me. The vulture fund capitalists, people over in New York, bought up most of Ireland during 2008, and they decided to sell at the peak in the market. They had made their money back. They're like, we're going to sell the house now. And so my landlord hit the house, and he was like, guys, you have to go as well. It's really shit for me. It's really shit for you. So this is it. And booted out. And so now I'm in a bad place, because obviously I wasn't thinking clearly. I wasn't planning about like long-term stuff like stabilizing income, stabilizing house, like resources. I wasn't thinking about those things. I was too busy like, how do I keep working hard? And what the hell is this pain all about? And so I got a bit sidelined from that, wasn't prepared, didn't have a house sorted. It was too hard to find them. Dublin got crazy around about that time, rents spiraling up, and the ability to find houses was just a nightmare. And I was like to the girl, I was like, could I stay in your gaff? Worst choice ever. So she was like, all right, this guy is like always in pain. I can love him, I can accept him for that, but now he's in my gaff. Like this is him spiraling down. And so I was with her for a month, and I found a house, and then she was like, look bro, I think we're gonna have to, I think this is the thing, I think we're gonna have to sever this one off. I'm not feeling this anymore. And then I was gutted, because now I'd lost the girl as well. I'd lost the house, I'd lost the girl, and I guess this is what's interesting, is the girl was the final straw. Like at that point I had there was the straw that broke the camel's back had not come. I was suffering with the leg, but I could keep fighting. I lost the house. I could just about keep fighting, and the girl was like, dude, like, look, I can't stand by this. This is just a train wreck. This is like literally sitting on a train that's like been off track for about, I don't know what, a year or so. And she was like, I'm out of here. I was just sitting down after this being like, my God, nothing now. This is rock bottom for me. This is just floored. Everything was gone now at this point. I found some crappy house in like the crappy part of town, sitting there, and I couldn't even sleep on a raised bed. I had to sleep on the floor, because if it was uneven, it would like trigger my back. So I believed anyway. And so, so I was there lying on this, and sitting in this room, this little crappy room, thinking to myself, oh my days, what's going on? This is probably the first time where it's like, there must be something wrong with the way I'm trying to do this. That was the point when I was like, the house is on fire, and I'm there drinking tea, and I'm like, it's quite smoky in here. There must be something I should do about this. There must be something a little bit wrong somewhere. And that's when it started to click with me a bit. And luckily I was listening to Jordan Peterson. I got a shout out to him. I think he's going to be big someday. He was talking about the virtues of getting small wins. And I'd heard that before, but he was the person I was listening to at this time, who was putting it into like really articulate language, really driving it home and all that. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, I wonder if like aiming so damn high and not getting the results, it might be the wrong way of doing things. Maybe what I'm doing has to change. And so I thought about the way I do things. And of course, it was that impatience. I see that impatience. I was like, I wouldn't commit to things for a long time, Like if I wanted to make a song back then, I would get angry because I thought I needed to practice as much as possible to get those 1,000 hours in. I was like, I have to practice as much as possible to get those 1,000 hours in. So I was like, all right, I'll sit down, I'll try and make a tune. But of course, like the tune would take like 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. And that would get me really angry. Because I was like, well, I need time to practice. Practice matters more because I have to be good enough. And so I would put off the tune thing. Now, looking back now, my God, I could have done so much better if I just said, fuck it, let's use this 5-note range that I was born with that's untrained and just make a load of tunes of that. I probably would have done way better that way. Because I think fundamentally creativity, what you create, will get more results faster than training. Unless you're gifted with training when you're younger or something like that. I had this immense impatience and frustration when it came to doing anything apart from this one thing I decided I needed to do, which was train. Which shows the danger. And again, it's like amazing that that's present in a young man. That's a great thing to have, and it needs to be cultivated correctly. And unluckily, I was too stubborn to get it cultivated properly. And when I reached out, it wasn't like... It didn't fan the fire, and not necessarily because the teachers are bad, but just because I wouldn't listen, because I had all this mental stuff going on. And so, like this was the first time when I was at that rock bottom. I was like, maybe just get a small result. You know, like maybe just small wins. Thought about the money. I was like, what? Like, you know, each session is a win. Just look at it that way and just try collect a load of those over the course of a week. And I looked at the health. It's like, fuck, dude. Like maybe I just need, like, maybe I don't need to look great. Maybe I just need to not be in pain all the time. How do I do that? Like, how do I maybe humble the goals a bit more? Maybe I don't need to, you know, be like the most excellent singers who've ever lived and the most excellent musicians who've ever lived. Maybe I just need to produce something that like is somewhat good, something that sounds good, you know, because people had said to me at this point, it's like, dude, you sound good, and I couldn't tell because it was just all pain inside me, you know what I mean? Like I'd sing and it'd sort of hurt, and every now and again someone would be like, that sounded really good, dude, like that, you've got a nice voice, and I'd be like, oh, no I don't. Inside of it, no I don't. Which is crazy because what are you looking for? Validation. But it's only validation when it's compared to like this sort of strange ideal, and it's this ridiculous nonsense loop, because someone will say, oh, you have a nice voice, and of course you notice it, but it doesn't heal it, you know what I mean? Nothing can heal that except for you in some sense. And so I was thinking, yeah, I'll just get these small wins. And that was amazing. Now, this is where things get a little bit funky, like spiritual wise, because once I made that decision, I was like, I'll get those small wins. And a lot of this stuff was kind of collaborating together. Once I kind of softened the ebb on that impatience, it's like the demon lost a little bit of its power, if you will. The monster, the corrupted god lost a bit of its power. It wasn't so strong that I was just furiously impatient. Like the pain of getting broken up, losing your house, being in pain, hitting rock bottom, finally kind of lifted my head a bit, finally took some of the momentum out of it, you know? It's almost like there was a force dragging me to the bottom, and once I hit it, it had lost quite a lot of its power. The impact was dispelled, and now all I have to do is really pick myself up. And so, what I did then was, I just took baby steps. And around about that time, I met a couple of trainers who had a different attitude. Now this is very important. And this is what I mean by this stuff, like stories save us in some sense, or whatever crazy stuff I'm talking about. I had heard of that physical therapist that, yes, okay, your back is broken. And the way I read that is that you're damaged forever. The Chinese said, if your back's gone, you're fucked. So that's it, the end of your life. Your back is damaged. You're not good enough. You're just not born good enough. And then I meet this trainer and he says, yeah, well, like, you know, you could have a burst spine, but we don't understand how that stuff works. The science on this is just crap. We don't understand how the body works. Don't think the authorities know. You know? You'd be amazed at what your body can heal itself with. Like, what you need to think about, I guess the first principle you need to accept is that if your muscles are strong, they take quite a lot of pressure off your spine. So maybe you need to stop thinking in terms of, okay, I am broken, I need to lie down and just waste away and accept it. Maybe you need to start thinking more along the lines of, I'm broken, but if I can build support systems, muscles, I can fix it. And that got me back in the gym. That got me back doing squats. And that started the upward spiral, you know. And I would do like 40 kg squats. That's not even half my body weight, but it was something. And I built it up from I started at 20. So I went in there and I was just doing 20 kg squats, like the worst. Built it up to 40. You know, going in there, getting those, I was like, do 3 sets of 8. That's all. And you just get that done, win. You go into, you know, I'd work in a tune, get that tune done, win. And as many of the tunes that you see up in the Uberboyo channel, like some of these were nuggets that came out here. Dionysus Lives popped out here. And no doubt that popped out here as well. And yeah, so this is what would happen. So what I am fundamentally trying to show through this story is that idea that your personality is your destiny. Now, while I was going through this endeavor, it's very hard for me to give you the understanding of just how much I didn't realize all of this stuff was connected in this way. I wasn't looking in the right place, you know. I was avoiding diving in and being like, I wonder, is there some fundamental beliefs that are triggering everything? No, I wasn't looking for that stuff. I was churning ahead, charging ahead, being driven. Something was driving me, you know. There was an inertia, and I mean that by there was a momentum carrying me in one direction, and it was carrying me to the floor, and stupidly I had to hit the floor. Now, I've said before, we said in the Man in His Symbols podcast, Jung noticed that he would meet people with such momentums going off inside of them. What might that be? Is that a god? We don't know. But this momentum would be going, and for example, it could bring some people to death. Imagine if I had been addicted to adrenaline and I got into cars. What would rock bottom be there? Curled up in a steel car crash. So there's this strange notion that personality is destiny and everything matters. And the great war, the individual war, I guess what I'm trying to do is show you what all this stuff really means to do it in practice. Because I always rant, people are like, oh, individuation, shadow work and all this. This is shadow work. This is what it's actually like. This is the consequences if you get it wrong. And this is how you can make it tactile and tangible. Instead of just, you know, getting all floozy and staying up in your head. Maybe you need to look at real deep down what your issues are. And really, really, really be honest with yourself. Because this is the core thing I learned. And once I sort of understood this on an emotional level, that's when everything changed, finally. That was when it was the final defeat of the problem, the final conquest. And that was all sourced around the idea of head. You can think of it of dreamer. I'm very much a dreamer. You'd be surprised. The guy, you know, with the YouTube channel about dreams and Carl Jung is a bit idealistic. A bit like, you would say that my energy is imagination. My energy is childlike in its exuberance. Even the word boyo has that energy of a sort of whiz kid type thing. And it's all up in the air and playful and ideas and thinking big and expansive thoughts and all that. And that was always who I am. And I was always the I can person, as I said. And I always had that incredible belief. Now, the shadow of that was always my shadow, you know. I just didn't want to face it. As I said, I hated the I canters. But the shadow of that is mundane. The shadow of that is the down to earth, the everyday, the tactile stuff, the boring stuff, you know? And likewise, for someone who's very down to earth and cynical, the shadow of that is the abundant creative belief. And it's not black and white. One is not wrong and the other is not right. That's not how it works. If you lack vision, you'll never lead. You'll never be able to think originally. You'll never be able to aim for the horizon and take people's minds and souls to places that they can never imagine. You'll never be able to command reality and whip it into shape. You need vision. Vision, belief, imagination. These are the highest faculties we have. They are incredible assets. But if you're only imagination and you never come in touch with reality, all your dreams will mean nothing. You will just keep dreaming and nothing will happen. You have to make it tactile. And that was my issue. I would get caught up in dreams and ideals, and even in the most basic sense, I want to be this way, you know? I want to be perfect. Perfection, if you will. Like, here's another thing that I kept on coming at. So, I want everything. I want to be perfect. Instead of just being good. Instead of just getting something done. I was like, no, I want to get the perfect thing done. I was forcing it into the box. It's like, I already know what perfect is. Instead of, I think I say in Dionysus Lives, it says the truth's in the flow. And the truth's in the process. The truth's in the movement. I was like, no, freeze frame. How do I make this happen? Exactly like, how do I live Jeff Buckley's life? How do I live Pavarotti's life? How do I Jim Morrison 2.0? Join a Jim Morrison. Like, you notice the cover bands, they never capture the energy of the person who does it first. Why? You know? So I was unbalanced in this sense. Heady, in my head, dreaming too much. And profoundly, my problem was I needed to come down to earth. And I'm going to use the metaphor of the chakras. Like, this is very strange how this stuff manifests in your body. But Jung said, this is what happens, you know. And you will have this as well, I'm sure. It must be something about human nature. Our nervous systems that make up our body are connected to our head. It's not like your body just said, all right, we've completed this part, and then I'm going to just turn off everything down here. Or I'm going to, like, you know, make this giant wall just here, and nothing below will have any connection to what's up here. Your body, once you read Descartes, your body was like, I was so stupid for all those millions of years. I'm such an idiot. I was there trying to not be, you know, I was there trying to be, therefore I am, not trying to, I was all about, of course, fucking idiot. So yeah, like, this stuff is connected. And the first chakra versus the top chakra being like your head, the heady, the imaginative stuff, the third eye, if you will, dreaming and all that stuff, expansive, up. And you have the heart chakra, where the voice comes from. And then you have down the bottom, you have the root chakra, the grounding one. Shame. Shame is usually stored in our lower parts. Like, what do Adam and Eve put on their yolks? But they put on their boyos what does Adam put on his boyo? And Eve put on her boyette when they discover knowledge, when they feel shame for the first time. They put leaves, they covered themselves. So down in the root chakra was where my problem was. This is actually where my pain was. And I thought about this at one point. I was like, I wonder if it's something to do with my root chakra. Am I not rooted? Am I not grounded? Am I not grounded? Is that what it is? What could that mean? And you know, like, it's like, people get caught up. They think that, all right, I'll just think the spiritual thing. I'll be like, I must be grounded, and then it'll solve everything. It's way more about this unified, holistic understanding. As I said, the radical side of pain science is understanding that all of this stuff, your pain is built up by what you went through that day, what you know, like, your entire phenomenological experience it contributes to how you feel pain. As I was saying, the injury that I got on my neck and then later in my hip was as much to do with what was my mindset, what was going on those specific days, and what frustrations were inside of me as they were to the damage. In fact, they probably weren't even that damaged. My nervous system just tightened the muscles up in a certain way to in response to what was going on inside my lump of nervous matter up here. And so the root chakra, the thing that I began to understand, now it wasn't like I didn't think about the root chakra and then figure it out. I just came eventually across the information that from studying anatomy so much that, well, my pain was centered in my hip, and one of the big consequences of the Industrial Revolution is that we all sit down too much and our glutes get turned off. And in fact, the root chakra, like the anal chakra, if you will, the gluteus maximus are the two servants of that, the two biggest muscles in your body as well, the two most important muscles for athletic performance, the gems of the body, the key muscles, many people said. And I never heard this before. I always thought the key muscles were bang and six pack, but it turns out no, your glutes are a big deal. And so then, and this is what I mean by this kind of spiritual stuff, like this way that everything seems connected in this profound way. I had this, like, I met a trainer. I met an old friend, and he was like, I want to go and get trained by this guy. So we go to this really good gym, this really cool trainer, and he's getting me to like lift and all this, and I'm starting to get like a lot stronger. I'm even doing a couple of deadlifts again, and I feel fine. It's very, very light though. And then he says, go to this PT. And I go to this PT, and the PT pretty much sits down to me and says, yeah, like he kind of drills home this mindset again. He's like, all right, you're all right. You can do it. Just go for it. That type of thing. And yeah, so I hear about hip thrusts. I hear about this way of just training the glutes directly. I'd never done this. Now, this is an astounding thing for going through all those personal trainers, and never once had any of them said to me, just train your glutes directly, properly. You know, maybe they did and I didn't listen because I was too afraid of this movement. Because this was my pain was the worst when I would stand up and then extend my hips a bit, you know. They kind of stick your googly bits out if you wanted to. That would kind of hurt a bit. And so I would avoid that. But then when you do a glute bridge, like this is your top of your body, this is your legs, and you kind of sit down and you thrust upwards, kind of stick your hips up into the air like a backward spider. And that's what I went for. And I just like loaded up the weight on them, just hammered on all the way. You know, I went up for like body weight nearly. And I hadn't done weight like that in ages. And like they just switched on. And within a month, now I'd been like years at this point. Within a month it was all better. Like I was able to sit down again. I felt fine. The pain had pretty much gone out of my leg. And I was sort of walking around being like, whoa, dude, this doesn't feel, whoa, this is too easy. That was too easy, bro. What? It can't be right. But it was. That was the solution. You know? That was the right thing. And it just solved the whole problem. And I'm not sure, like I didn't know what to make it at first because it seemed like it was such a physical solution. I just had to do the correct exercise. And yes, that's true. Like this is sort of the kind of the brutal reality is that you're not going to just go into your head and solve all your problems through like imagination and all that. Maybe you could do something like Buddha did or whatever, but I try to take a far more active understanding of this stuff. And the way I solved my problems were pragmatic, you know. Doing that glute thing, around about that, I even got a better, like more money from the job I was doing. So things went up a level altogether, all round. And it was close to the time I started going on YouTube as well, you know. Maybe it was a little bit after I started going on YouTube. But yeah, like we started seeing real solutions and whatnot. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. I finally transformed out of the state of suffering into the state of, well, heaven, which was not suffering. It finally happened. And it took that thing, but it was almost like me facing this really basic idea that you're not broken. Like I believed that I was broken for so long, and I believed that I wasn't supposed to, I couldn't, you know, do stuff that's too heavy or take too many risks with my body because I damage it. And I had to learn how to do techniques and all this stuff and do it right, you know. I guess that's what happened because I was so impatient. My body forced me to start asking the question, I have to do things right. And then finally, the right thing to do was hip thrusts. And when I did that, I could then apply all that pressure and energy back onto them. And that turned out to be true. It's that when I was doing the right thing, I could inject all that will into it and it worked fine. Like this is where hard work started to make sense, if you will. And so that absolutely changed everything because it completely changed my relationship with pain. It made me realize that I'm not broken and destined to pain forever, but I can in fact overcome it. I can conquer pain, and it only takes me to do the right thing to do that. And so, I guess why I'm saying this is that in some sense, this is the most tactile and results orientated shadow work you'll ever do. Like if you really want to change your life, As Jung said, you won't find God unless you look low enough, and I had to literally look the lowest, my arse, all the way to the ground. How does my glutes hold me up? Well, the power of gravity to drag me down. I was dealing with the very, very fundamentals. A dreamer needed to get pulled down, and it forced me to embody virtues. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that all those virtues that I was talking about that somewhat saved me later on, discipline, consistency, doing the right thing, and will, but channeled properly and all that. This long, arduous process was like this war where I finally embodied them. And then most of the next things, like then when I started looking into music, because I said, fuck it, I'm not going to try being a musician for a while. I'm just going to see what works. I'm going to just do something that works. That's sort of where my attitude came towards the end. I was like, I'm just going to do what makes sense to me. And then when I just felt the urge to make a tune again, I just went for it, and I just said to myself, right, I'll do it right. I won't try silly range. I'll just go for what works for me, what I really enjoy and whatnot. And one of the very quick results of that was the song called Machine Is Just a Whore. And like, I absolutely love that. I don't give a fuck who likes that. I just think that's a great tune, something I like listening to. And obviously, like, loads of people liked it as well. I was like, well, of course, that's how they all said it happened to them. All those people I admired, they said, oh, one day I just made something for myself, and then people liked it. And you're like, oh, it happened to me. What? But the whole time I was in the way. I always wanted it to happen, and then finally, when I just didn't want it to happen anymore, or I didn't care. It's not that I didn't want it. I just didn't care. It fucking happened. Like, and they all told me that would happen as well. They all said this is how it will happen. But even then, I didn't let it happen. I got in the way. And then finally, when I stopped, it happened. Obviously, it's like they're telling the truth. And so, I want to tell you the story about Pavarotti as well. Pavarotti, famous singer, one of the greatest opera singers of the 20th century, went through the same thing. He wanted to hit high C sharps, like these incredibly high notes, and he stressed himself out trying to do this to the point where he got a vocal ulcer, a vocal nodule. So his vocal cords got injured, basically. What the fuck are you going to do then? You get a vocal nodule and you're a singer, it's the end. That's what most people think. They think it's forever, it's damaged forever. And so he gave up. He said, oh, fuck this. Good luck. I'm not going to keep hurting myself for this. This is nonsense. And he said, you know what? I'm just going to sing what I like. And he went down to the local place. He took a month off, let the nodule heal. And then he just started to sing songs he liked. Did it for his pure enjoyment. That's when people started to notice. That's when he started to get proper momentum. It was very similar for me. And it was this inner thing that happened. And so when you're getting into all this stuff, when you're talking about psychology and you're talking about like individuation, I don't want you to get too caught up in that heady stuff. I really want you to look at the story I just told you there and say to yourself, fuck, I'm definitely doing something similar. And I want to know, I'm riddled with problems. Like I'm far from perfect. I'm far from conquered anything. I only feel like I'm getting started right now. And the mood has all changed with me. My head's in a completely different place than I was when I started out. Now I feel like I'm getting started. Do you know what I mean? And it's hard to describe that, but there's an energy underneath that for me that's so much different. But you definitely have it too, And it would serve you a lot to dig this stuff up. And I can tell you this I can shout it in your ear, but if you don't do it, it's not going to have any effect, and you'll just drive straight to rock bottom. And I don't know what it is about humanity. Are our personalities born a little bit imbalanced? Is it a failure of the way we are raised? Or is it like it could genuinely be down to something that we are just born with these personalities, and it's our responsibility to take them and to kind of fill them out a little bit to mitigate against their flaws? I guess the idea is know yourself, as the oracle said. You have to know what you are, and that's to know your strengths and then to know your weaknesses, so you can mitigate against your weaknesses and you can go for your strengths. I know that I'm an incredibly imaginative thinker, which allows me to be very good at storytelling, very good at visualizing, thinking, creative and all those things. But I also know that I have to balance that incredibly with pragmatism, cynicism, pessimism even. Like I have to teach myself to be a little bit more bleak, a little bit more down to earth. I need to do all that stuff. And I know it now. And I guess the question is, what's your issue? Where is your issue? Like, if you're in this, no matter what you're playing at, you're working on your mentality. These are the real consequences of it. Like, it's real. It has effects to the point where it can physically manifest. And you've probably lived quite a life already, so you've probably got plenty of this stuff active right now. And if you want to dive into the unconscious and all that, like maybe you get into the dreams, it's like, all right, cool. Dreams served a lot for me. They got a lot, and I'm going to do probably the next podcast. I'll talk about what I went through with dreams, the world I entered in there. But reality and this grounded stuff really had probably the most transformative effect for me. Dreams taught me how to think big, but this stuff taught me how to live big, how to feel big. Like, I understand how much health is tied to happiness because of this now. I feel very centered. Beating that problem really helped me contextualize what victory is. I guess it made me an artist in some way. As I said, it fixed my artistic mindset. So think about all that stuff. Well, there you go. So what that was for me was my falling into the deep and warring with the underworld gods and then coming back out on the other side. Unfortunately, I had to live through that because I was too stubborn and too stupid to solve it myself. But when I solved that stuff, a lot of stuff started going good for me, which I guess gives credence to what Nietzsche and Jung are talking about. It's not just theory. There is a practice to it, and when you put it into practice, it works. And it's amazing how much you change and what it takes to embody that. And so there's always a war, and I guess there's great value in the way it happened for me. And in some sense, it is all right to live it. But I wonder how much potential I missed out on. If I got this stuff straighter earlier, would I be even higher than I am now, you know? And what do I still have to conquer? It's hard to know. It's really hard to know because you're unconscious of it and your personality is stopping you from looking at it. It's your shadow, by all means. Now, a lot of people ask me these days, they're like, oh, how do I do this? How do I do the dream reading? How do I do the shadow work? How do I do the going in and dealing with your childhood traumas? How do I get out of rock bottom? They ask me and they're like, what are you, like, how do I use this stuff? How can you help me to use this stuff? Show me, teach me to use this stuff. So I have been thinking a lot recently about how I'm going to start consulting people and helping people because they are reaching out to me, and I've been doing a lot of chats with lads in the Discord, for example. I get up on the video chats and I'd banter with them and I try to figure out what's going on and see where their head's at, and I'd work with them and see can we get results. And I've noticed a few lads have had a little bit of a transformation. Like, I've met one or two of them. Shout out, you know who you are. And I was like, whoa, damn, the ideals are changing them and whatnot. And so this is what I want to work with people on. Like, one thing that people ask me for a lot is storytelling. Now, that's a lot more of an active one. That's a lot more of like, I want to gain this skill that will help me take over the world type thing. I want to gain the skill that will give me power, that will help me express myself, will help me move people, will help me, open magic doors, will help me light up people's eyes when I'm in the room, will give me presence, charisma, power, and all that stuff. And I definitely want to start going down that route and talking about it a lot more. I think it's a fantastic skill, and I think I have some interesting takes on it. But nonetheless, another one I've noticed is there's some people who are at rock bottom. There are some people who are struggling with the weight of these great ideas. Perhaps they are even possessed by the demons I've mentioned: scarcity, impatience, that type of stuff. Like, maybe that stuff's holding them down. Perfectionism, yeah, that was the other one. Like, maybe they are in the clutches of this envy. Maybe all that stuff has them, and they want to know how to break free from that. They want to get on the upward so they can start thinking to themselves, all right, they can move out of that passive reactive coping phase and move more towards that active, abundant, jumping out at the world, tiger-like world where you're like, I'm going to use storytelling to shape the world into the way I want it. And so I guess you could say the outwards skills and the inner skills. And I want to talk a bit about that inner skill and how people can craft it and what they can do from it. And obviously I'm going to ask you, if you want my help to do this, email me, get on top of it, and we can actually go through this problem and mitigate a huge amount of issues for you. Like, I'm trying to describe to you that I didn't do this and it caused me pain physically, and it held me back. And when I did do this, when I finally put my ego aside and embraced humility, and I guess this is where I learned the virtue of humility, when I embraced humility and stopped arrogantly assuming I could just do it all the way I wanted to, and I said, okay, I'm gonna humbly take baby steps, that's when reality started to change for me. And so what I'm really getting at, yes, is that idea of you need to dig into yourself. You need to, I guess, use storytelling on yourself first before you can use it on the world. Here's my thesis for you, you know. You got to go into yourself and you got to say, well, what is my story? You've got to articulate that stuff out. The dreams can help you do that, but maybe before you do dreams, you should just do the most basic one of all. What the fuck happened in my life? Like, what happened to me? Who am I? Where am I going? Who am I? Let's paint a picture of who I am. Oh, wow, look, I'm impatient. I've been impatient that time. When that bad thing happened, I was impatient again. I wonder, have I not solved that? Well, obviously you haven't. You know, and then you'll start to see your shadow. And your shadow is this stuff. And you want your shadow. I knew, because I was the same, man. I was the same. I wanted my shadow to be, you know, how do I do magic spells? I wanted my shadow to be, how do I think about absolute evil? That's what I wanted my shadow to be. It's like, I'll just think of evil. I'll think of just the baddest army, just like, you know, just a million Hitlers trapped into a room, and I'll visualize what it'd like to be all of them at once. And I would imagine that's what you got to do. And then I'd think of all the power they had, and like I'd wrap it up and turn it into this like ball of superpower, and then I'd give it to me and I'll be able to like cast. But yeah, man, you want to escape. That's what you want to do. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to escape and believe, all right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invent this dream world where I am in control and where things work out, because my life isn't working out right now. And then when I burst that bubble and humbly said, okay, the real shadow is my actual life, the actual stuff down here that's not going well, you know? And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to start fixing this. This is what brought me to Earth. This is what brought me back in contact with the rubber in the world. And this is what got results to a large extent. And once I started getting results here, these things interact. My God, how much better I could free up the dream thing. I found myself when I was doing these English sessions, after I do them, I bring a couple of dreams with me and I'd like I'd play with them. And I'd do what Jung said even more. And I had collected them all and that was working through them. Bang. This is when suddenly I started to get like a lot of ideas that you hear in this channel, which I would call original. Like this is when I discovered an archetype. Now that's a story for another time. But you see what I'm saying? So if you want to do this, get in touch with me. We'll sit down and we'll try to do it properly. We'll try mitigate. We'll try avoid you having problems. And we'll open up your vista for potential to make sure it's not too bad. So hit me up. I'll leave a link in the description and you can email me on that. Yes, I'll leave the email and you can hit me up in an email and we can talk about getting going with that. Otherwise, I hope you vastly enjoyed this to an extent that is incomprehensible, and I will see you around. You know, I hang out on this part of YouTube, so you'll probably see me here again soon enough. The next one, I will likely chat a bit about dreams, what I went through with my dreams and where that took me. That could be an interesting story. So yeah, drop down there in the comments, have a bit of crack, hit up with the consultations, and I'll talk to you later, people. Bye bye.